Yo, what's up guys? It's Brandon here from Addict Gaming, and today I'm going to show you a PvP Necromancer build that I've been using. And this build is pretty kick-ass in PvP. It is sort of the power meta build for Necromancers right now. This build takes advantage of the axe and focus weapons as well as the staff. It also focuses a lot around Death Shroud. That's where we are going to be getting a lot of our damage from the auto attack and Death Shroud. And we're going to get a lot of damage from the axe and some boon removal and damage from the focus as well. You get some nice CC with the staff as well as some condition removal. You got a fear and you get a little bit of life force gain from the auto attack. And of course, as any power necro build, we will be taking advantage of the Lich Form Elite, which does immense amounts of damage. It also pierces as well. So we will be hitting multiple targets for 5,000 to 6,000 damage on average for just the auto attack on the Lich Form. This is an ability, actually it's probably one of the only elite abilities in the game that actually feels like an elite, because when you use Lich Form you can actually turn the tide of a battle, especially if you're losing. And especially on important fights like middle fights at the keep or at the gate, and you guys, if it's part of your strategy to really keep that point, you could pop into Lich Form and you could just mow down everybody. One thing you do want to keep in mind is that as soon as you pop Lich Form, people are going to come to you immediately. You will be the number one target once you are in Lich Form. So it's good to be up on a cliff, or it's good to be in a place that's not so accessible, and people can steal your stability and CC you. And at that point you might as well just leave Lich Form to get into your Death Shroud so you can survive. So some of the positives of this build, the number one being of course how much damage we could actually put out. With Rending Claws and Ghastly Claws on our main hand axe, we are going to be putting out a ton of damage. And Ghastly Claws also is going to give us life force gain to pop into our Death Shroud. And in our Death Shroud we have our auto attack, which is going to do anywhere from 2,500 to 4,000 damage depending on how much armor the enemy has. And we also have Doom as an AoE fear, which can stop an enemy from stomping one of our allies, or even fear them away so we can stomp one of their allies. As far as condition removal goes in this, we have quite a bit of condition removal. We have consume conditions as our heal, so depending on how many conditions we have, we will remove all conditions and get more health depending on how many conditions we had on us. We also are bringing a couple of wells. We have Well of Power, which will turn conditions on us and our allies into boons. And we also have on our staff, we have Putrid Mark, which will remove 3 conditions when somebody triggers that as well. Now with every power class, they all have their defensive mechanisms. Like a Thief has stealth, a Mesmer has stealth, and the just overall confusion of their phantasms or clones out. Warriors have a higher armor rating and a lot more HP. And Necros, we have Death Shroud, so you're going to really want to learn how to utilize your Death Shroud to its full potential, and it's extremely powerful. And as you watch this build video, you might think we're going to be very squishy, but if you have Death Shroud and you're able to utilize it, then you can escape a lot of damage and also put out a ton of damage at the same time. Now, of course, with every build, there are a few negatives, and this affects most Necromancer classes, and that's the weakness to CC that most Necromancers deal with. You might remember a while back, I don't remember how long back it was, maybe 9 months or so, the Mace Shield and Hammer Warrior became extremely popular because it was a very hard counter to Necromancers. Because they have so much CC, we don't have much access to stability in this build or really in any Necromancer build. We do have a lot of stun breakers which will help us out, but if you go up against a Hamba Warrior and they're knocking you around with their hammer, it's going to become very obvious to you that it's just a general weakness that Necromancer builds have, and that's the weakness to CC. Now, another negative that you can say about this build is that when people realize you are a power necro, you tend to be the number one target on the list. We do get a little bit of help from our Death Shroud, where we can hide in Death Shroud and cast our CCs and things like that, while we let our allies do some damage to the targets around us. But if you go into almost any group fight and the other team has a Thief, you will be sure to have that Thief on your butt pretty much the whole fight. So it's not necessarily a negative, but it's definitely going to be something you have to get used to, because you are going to be getting jumped by other power builds like a Thief or a Mesmer. They're usually going to be going for you. Okay, well I think you listened to me ramble on long enough about the build, so let's get into the gear setup for this Necromancer build. For our amulet, we are going Berserker Amulet, of course, because we want as much damage as we can possibly get out of this build. For the runes, I use Rune of the Traveler. Some people might want to use Rune of Strength or something like that, but I just cannot play any PvP build that doesn't have the movement speed increase. And you guys know this about me. I think almost every build video I put out, I use Rune of the Traveler just because I think it's an amazing rune, especially when you're playing a DPS class and you need to move around the battlefield a lot more. The only exception I would give to Rune of the Traveler would be to like Guardians or Bunker builds who are just going to go home or mid and sit there. Now for our sigils, we have Axe and Focus. On the Axe, we are using Sigil of Air, and on the Focus, we are using Sigil of Fire. Now this can proc at any time. It can proc when we're on our Axe Focus, or if we're in our Axe Focus and we go into Death Shroud and we are casting our auto attack, it can also proc our sigils while we're still in Death Shroud. So if you're going to go into Death Shroud, make sure you are in your Axe and Focus weapon set. And also, even if you go into Lich form, you will still proc the Sigil of Fire and Sigil of Air. Now for our staff, we're using Sigil of Battle. We'll get a little bit of might when we switch to the staff. And we have Sigil of Energy, which will give us more endurance so we can dodge and give us a little more survivability. So that's the gear setup. If you look at our stats, we have 2,194 power. We also have 41% crit chance, and we have 203% crit damage. So those are all pretty high. We also do have 15% boon duration, which is pretty nice, and we have the 30% life force pool, extra life force pool, meaning to say we will build our life force quite quickly in this build, so we will be able to stay in Death Shroud longer because the pool is much bigger. Okay, let's look at the traits in this build, and of course we are going to try to get more damage through our traits and also increase the effectiveness of our Death Shroud and the abilities in Death Shroud. We have 6 in Spite, 2 in Curses, and 6 in Soul Reaping. In Spite, we have Parasitic Bond, gain health when you kill a foe. Now this would be more useful in PvE, not so much in PvP. Reaper's Might, Life Blast and Plague Blast grant might every time you use it. And this is the auto attack in your Death Shroud, and Plague Blast is the auto attack in your Death Shroud while you are underwater. So you're not going to have to worry about Plague Blast, but Life Blast is the auto attack in Death Shroud, and every time we use it, we will grant a little over 17 seconds of might. Death into Life, gain healing power based on your power. Chill of Death, cast Spinal Shivers on a foe when attacking them while their health is below the threshold. So once our enemy hits 50%, we will cast Spinal Shivers, which is actually also our skill on the Focus. And what Spinal Shivers does is you chill your target and remove up to 3 boons, and you deal extra damage based on how many boons you remove. Siphon Power, gain might when struck while your health is below the threshold. Now this is probably one of the most useless minor traits actually in the whole game. You get 1 stack of might when you drop below 25% health. It's a very ridiculous trait, especially for a Grandmaster tier minor trait. I've seen Grandmaster minor traits that are better than a lot of other classes' actual Grandmaster major traits. So this is a horrible, horrible minor trait, but you know, we gotta live with it because we want to get close to death. It increases damage to enemies below the health threshold, and that's a 20% damage increase while somebody's health is below 50%. So that's gonna be a huge damage buff for us, especially if we're in Death Shroud or we are in Lich form. We're already hitting like a truck in those forms, and the close to death trait is just gonna put our damage over the top in these forms. So again, we are gonna hit really hard in this build. And you can see through the Spite trait line that as soon as the target reaches 50% HP, our damage just goes through the roof, with traits like Chill of Death and Close to Death. In Curses, we have 2 points. Barbed Precision, critical hits have a chance to cause bleeding. Now this doesn't apply to us so much because we're in a power build. And Focus Rituals, we are bringing 2 wells, so I have thought before about dropping this, but there have just been too many times where I needed to put the wells at a distance from me onto a point. And if you don't have this, you would have to go onto the point and drop your wells, and you would probably end up taking a lot of damage in the process. So I recommend still keeping this. If you can find a way to make it work without the ground targeting, then go right ahead and grab a trait that could be more useful to you. And we have 6 in Soul Reaping. Gluttony increases life force gained from skills. The effectiveness is increased by 10%. This is going to let us build up our life force a lot faster so we can get into Death Shroud quicker. Vital Persistence. Life Force drains slower while in Death Shroud. Now, there are a couple of choices here that you can pick, but I like Vital Persistence just because if the Death Shroud is not degenerating as fast, we can stay in Death Shroud longer, and that will give us the ability to absorb more damage and to put out more damage, as well as stacking might with our Reaper's Might trait in the Spite trait line. Last Gasp. Gain Spectral Armor when your health falls below the threshold. So when you get to 50% health, you will put on Spectral Armor, which gives you 7 seconds of protection, and you also gain Life Force while you are being attacked. And it's also a stun breaker as well. Now, the major trait in the Master tier, this is where you can change the trait a little bit. You can take, we are taking Unyielding Blast, I am anyway. That's where Life Blast and Plague Blast stack vulnerability when you use it. So we'll be gaining might and stacking vulnerability, so we're really increasing our damage while we use Life Blast. You could put Unyielding Blast in the Adept tier, and then instead you could take Soul Marks, and Soul Marks gives you Life Force when your marks are triggered. And remember, we are using a staff as our second weapon set. So you can do that if you want. I like this setup a little bit better with Vital Persistence and Unyielding Blast. But if you want more Life Force gain, you can use Unyielding Blast and Soul Marks instead. Strength of Undeath. You do more damage while above the Life Force threshold. That's a 5% damage increase when your Life Force is above 50%. And Death Perception increases critical hit chance while in Death Shroud by 50%. And remember, our crit chance right now is about 41%, so when we are in Death Shroud, we will have a 91% crit chance, and that will guarantee our Life Blast is pretty much critting every single time we use it, and we're getting might and stacking vulnerability, so we're going to get a ton of damage out of our Life Blast on our Death Shroud. Okay, now let's jump into our heal and our utilities and our elite, and then we will jump into our weapon skins, and we will be done. Now, if we look at our heal, we are using Consume Conditions. It's on a 25-second cooldown, and you actually get a ton of healing from it, and it removes all conditions on you. This is an extremely, extremely strong heal, probably one of the strongest heals in the game. So if you get 5,430 healing, and you get an extra 743 healing depending on how many conditions you have on you. So if you're fighting like an engineer who could put 7 conditions on you right away, you will remove all those, you'll get a ton of healing, you'll heal for almost 10,000 and remove all those conditions on you. So it's a very obvious choice to bring this in a power build, and especially in PvP where some people run very heavy condition builds, and it just wipes all of those out. Now we have 2 wells. We are bringing Well of Corruption. This will convert boons on the enemy into conditions. So if you're facing a guardian or an elementalist on a point, or any class that's going to stack a lot of boons, then you are going to not only remove those boons, but you're going to turn those boons into conditions. And we have Well of Power. You can choose Well of Power if you want. I like Well of Power. You could also choose Well of Suffering. That will increase your damage because you're stacking vulnerability and it does a lot of damage. But I like the Well of Power because you do get a little bit of the stability from it, and it's a stun breaker, and it's more condition cleanse because it will convert our conditions into boons. Again, it's not just removing conditions, it's actually turning those conditions into boons. So I really like the Well of Power, but again, if you want more damage, you can bring Well of Suffering. And the last utility is Spectral Armor. Remember, we do get Spectral Armor from one of our traits, so I like to use the Spectral Armor fairly early because our other Spectral Armor from the traits procs at 50% health, so it would be best to use this one before you get to 50% health. It gives you protection for 7 seconds, and you gain the life force when you're taking damage for 6 seconds. So what I like to do when I use Spectral Armor is I can use Spectral Armor, then pop into Death Shroud, and as they're trying to get me out of Death Shroud, they're actually giving me more life force, and I will be able to stay in Death Shroud even longer. And it's also a stun breaker, which is just icing on the top. Then we have Lich Form for our elites. Now, like I said in the intro, Lich Form is it's like one of the only elites in this game that actually feel like a true elite, because if you are in a team fight and say one of your guys goes down and you're outnumbered 3 to 4 or even 3 to 5, you can pop Lich Form and you can just mow enemies down. That's how strong it is. It pierces for 1, so you're going to hit multiple enemies, and especially if they're trying to res one of their allies that you just killed and put down, you could just hit the guy who's downed and you'll be hitting the guy trying to res him as well. And the amount of damage that you'll put out with Lich Form is insane. It really is an ability that can turn any fight into your favor. So you want to make sure that you use it at a very opportune time. Don't use it when you are getting ganged up on, because you can get your stability stolen and you could get CC'd. So you kind of want to be strafing around and moving around, trying not to get hit, and dodging a little bit as well. So use Lich Form when you really need to change the tide of the battle, and this will win games for you. So that's how strong it is. For our weapon skills, our axe and focus, we have Rending Claws. This will allow us to stack more vulnerability. Remember, we are stacking vulnerability from Unyielding Blast in our Death Shroud. When we use Life Blast, we'll stack vulnerability, and we'll also stack vulnerability while we are in our axe focus weapon set. So hopefully we could get a high stack of vulnerability on our target, just increasing our damage by a lot. Then you have Ghastly Claws. This will hit for 4 to 5k depending on the target you're hitting. Summon Spectral Claws to slash your foe in a quick flurry of strikes, and you gain 12% life force as well. And then we have Unholy Feast. Cripple nearby foes and remove a boon, and gain retaliation for each foe you strike. So the retaliation is good, and the cripple, I mean, everything about the skill is good. You're also removing 1 boon from every person that you hit. Then we have Reaper's Touch on the focus. Send out a sight that bounces between foes and allies. It causes vulnerability, like our Rending Claws and our Light Blast, and it gives regeneration on allies. Now we don't have much healing power, so the regeneration isn't really a big deal, but the vulnerability is nice. It's 4 stacks of vulnerability for 14 seconds, and we get 3% life force from this skill as well. And then Spinal Shivers. Chill your target and remove up to 3 boons, dealing extra damage based on the number of boons you remove. So you can see if you remove no boons, it does 351 damage, but if you remove 3 boons, you're doing upwards to 877 damage. So you're going to really want to make sure that you're using this on a target that has as many boons as possible. So, it does max out at 3, but just make sure you're using it on a target that has at least 3 boons on them. And it is a 7-second chill as well, so chill is an extremely strong condition. Now for our staff, we have Necrotic Grasp. Send out a grasping hand that damages foes in a line and grants you life force. So this is, it does pierce, and this is good to stack up life force. I like to use it on when somebody is in the down state and nobody's going to come res him. I'll just sit there and use my Necrotic Grasp on his down body just to stack up my life force. Then we have Mark of Blood. Inscribe a mark that bleeds foes when they trigger it and grants regeneration to allies. Now, again, we don't really have healing power, so the regeneration isn't a big deal, and we don't have much condition damage, so the bleeding's not a big deal either. So this one, it will do a little bit of power damage, but it's not as important as the other marks on the staff. We also have Chill Blades. Inscribe a mark that chills foes when they trigger it and leaves a poisonous area. So this applies chilled and poison. So this is actually a very, very strong mark. This is probably, other than the fear, this is probably the most important mark in the staff. Then we have Putrid Mark. Inscribe a mark that transfers conditions from yourself to foes when they trigger it. So this, it's kind of a common theme with Necromancers. You're not just removing conditions or removing boons, but you're switching them back and forth. You're either turning boons into conditions, turning conditions into boons, or taking your conditions and putting on other people. So this takes 3 conditions from you, and when it's triggered, I'll put those 3 conditions on me onto my target with Putrid Mark. Then Reaper's Mark, this is also a very important one. Inscribe a mark that causes fear when foes trigger it. When they are trying to stomp your ally, or there's somebody rezzing one of their allies, then throw your Reaper's Mark down, and then stomp or res your ally, or do what you need to do. Now, before we end this video, just a few tips on playing this build. Like I said before, if you're going to go into Death Shroud, make sure you pop your Spectral Armor before you do, and that will keep your life force actually going up while you're in Death Shroud, and you can stay in it longer. You can also use your Spectral Armor before you pop your Lich form, and that will give you some protection so you won't go down so fast in your Lich form. The one big tip I can give you guys though is in PvP, at the beginning of the match, Necros don't start with any life force. Now what you can do is, when it says game begins and then you have the 10-second countdown, you can actually summon your bone fiends and summon your shadow fiend, and then as soon as they're summoned, you can actually replace them with the wells, your well of corruption and your well of power, and then that counts as minion deaths, and the minion deaths will actually give you some life force. So you'll have about 3,000 to 4,000 life force at the beginning of the match, and if you get jumped by a thief or something at the beginning, you'll have a little bit of life force to deal with it. Alright, well there it is. That is the Necromancer PvP build. It is pretty much the meta power build for necros right now. It's extremely efficient in PvP, and I think you'll have a lot of success if you try it. Make sure you leave comments below if you have any questions or suggestions or just comments about the video. Make sure you leave them below and I'll get back to you. Please like, share, and favorite this video if you enjoyed it. That means a lot to us, and I will see you guys next time. I might as well wait because the runes are changing and the traits were changing as well, the way the traits work. So if we talk about some positives of this build, now this build has very heavy condition damage, but it also has very good condition variation. It has, I think we can apply every single condition in the game on this build except for fear. We can do weakness. It's not a direct application, but we can do weakness through using a blast finisher in a poison field. Doesn't mean that we will, but